Alright, so in this tutorial, we are going to be talking about using TypeScript in our Node.js in order to prepare us for Express.js in the next couple of videos. So for that, what I want to do is just to do npm init to initialize my project using npm, enter, then package name, I'll use that. You can do npm init, then space -y to just avoid these questions. Enter. All right, so now to create a package of JSON, we've not provided a description yet, so it's just getting the description from my README file. So I can just remove this. All right, now let's create a TypeScript file. So for that, I'm going to say src/app.ts. Let's clear this. I also want to create a .env.local file for development. So I will call this port, say port 5000. Then I'm going to say const port is equals to process.env.PORT. Of 4000. All right, so this is our first error we are seeing here. It says, do you want to install type definition for Node? Yes, so we can just copy this command to install it to avoid that error. Enter. So as you can see, the error is gone. Installing this package here gives you type definition files for Node.js built-in modules. So for example, like file system, fs, http, process, just like we just saw here. So basically, when we are using this, we're actually using a .d.ts file that allows TypeScript to understand the shape and overload of Node API, thereby enabling features like IntelliSense and auto-completion in editors. So if you want to actually read more on that, you can just search for it. Node and types and node types. So no worries, I'll put this in the description. So it basically enables features like compile time error when you are using node modules inconsistently, as you can see here. So instead of using foo, it's supposed to be UTF-8. So that's why it's giving this type of error. So very, very handy in development and in order to make your TypeScript robust. All right, so you can just come to this module here by your left and read through all of them here on that TypeScript. So now what I want to do, I want to say console.log port number is port, save, and do node app.ts. Sorry, node src/. So as you can see, now running on port 4000. So it's not actually loading this port. So we need to fix that. So I didn't save it. I didn't save the file. So I'm going to save it now and run it again. All right. So I'm going to run node src/app.ts. So it's giving me port number is this. Although we defined it to be 5000, that's because it's not loading this file here. So to do that, Node has a new feature. So I can just create a script for this. So I just call it dev, then say node src/app.ts. So now if I do npm dev, npm run dev, come on, npm run dev. I need to save this. So what I want to do now, do auto save. So I will go to my file, then click on auto save here. Good. So that I don't have to always hit the Control S or Command S. So I'll run that again. So you can see it's working now. So what I want to do, I want to be able to load this file here, this .env.local. So I can do -env-file is equals to .env.local. So now let's run that again. So as you can see now it's loading the variable defined in my .env.local file. In production, you are most likely going to use .env. So this file .env.local is used in development. So in production, you use .env. That is when you want to deploy your application. And most of the time, you always try to ignore this file. So you have to put it gitignore. So we are going to ignore .env.local. Then we also ignore node modules. Because when you do npm install, it's going to check your package.json and install all the packages there and create the node module files. So there's no need to actually push it to GitHub. So if you want to actually read more on this, you can actually check out the documentation. So I'm going to Arc and I want to search for Node and env-file. This one here. So you can actually read through it. So under command lines, the second one here. So, and there are also some added features like this. All right. So next thing we want to do, we want to be able to watch our file. So instead of always, doing npm run dev, we want to actually watch. So there is a approach for that. So what you can do is just include the --watch. Before, you need to install a dev dependency nodemon or use node dev for that to watch your file so that it can restart your node process anytime there's changes in your file. So with this approach that Node has included, you can do this on the fly. So I'm going to clear this now and run this. So now we don't have to run this command over and over. So now I can change the ports. Let's say I change this to 3000. Save. You can see now it's reflected. So what I want to do is to actually write some TypeScript code. So basically, Node does not check types in your TypeScript file. So for example, let's say const calcalsum. Then I'm going to say return a plus b, a comma b number, this number. And I'm saying const is equals to calcSum, then 4,10, then console.log. Okay. Autocomplete is gotten from the package we installed in our editor. So which is Amazon Q, as you can see here. So we also have Amazon Q for command, so which is for the terminal, which is installed by default when you install the Amazon Q globally. So when we use the brew install Amazon, so save. All right, so there's an issue here. We are running into an issue here because if you check the documentation on Node and TypeScript, so this one here, you'll see that since this version, Node.js has experimental support from TypeScript syntax via type striping. So basically, when you want to write type annotation like this, you need to include this flag. So let's do that now. So I'm going to just include it here and save. But if we check the version of Node we are using version 22.17. So what we can do is let's open a new terminal and use nvm to install this version. So I'm going to say nvm install this, enter. So once we install this, it's going to use this version. Not found. Oh, sorry. So you can this should not be in uppercase. You can either remove it or just do v, lowercase v, and enter. Good, that's installed. So let's check back and let's try and clear this and run this again. You see now it's working. Basically what this is doing is that it's actually not checking your types actually, because with Node, it actually replaces this type annotation with space. So for example, before it runs this code, it removes, it's just like removing this type here and removing this, then running your code, right? But so for example, if I change this to boolean and save, it's still going to run your code. But with editor language server, you can get this linting. So this is just because we are using VS Code. So what if we are using maybe a text editor, not an IDE like VS Code? This linting will not show up. So another thing is, if we want to run something like this one here, this is a more complex TypeScript construct. So enum, and we have others like namespace, parameter, properties, and decorators. If you try to do this will not work. So if I go back and paste this here and save, we can see that our application crashed. So what we can do, we can actually change this stripe to transform. Let's check it out. Transform, yeah. So I need to restart. Okay, I need to restart and run it again. And now it works. And also this flag also, it includes the stripe as well. So you don't need to include stripe again. So it automatically includes the experimental stripe type. So you don't need to do this. So it says from this version onward, types striping is enabled by default. So I don't really think the current version of Node as of the time of recording this video is on that version 23. Okay, so what you can do, you can actually install nvm install Node, the latest version of Node. So if I do this, clear, then node-v. So now we're using this version of Node. So with this version, we don't need to add this. I'm not too clear about the explanation, but let's see. And let's try and run this again. It still shows error. So it means you still have to add this. Maybe later versions, you have to remove this. So let's see, let's scroll down and see. Oh, so what it's saying is that if we were to only run this, right? So let's say we remove this, because we're using the latest version of Node, it will still work. So we don't need to use this stripe flag. So if I just close this, then run this now, it's supposed to work. It's still using Node version, this version. So I need to close this and use Node nvm, use Node, then run this again. So we see that it works now, but for complex types like enum, namespace, we need to use this flag. So now if I go back and save, you see that it works. But what it's telling us that in later versions in the future, we don't need to include this flag. So you can do away with it in later versions. So you actually need to continuously check this docs to see when that happens. So if you notice, so far we've not installed TypeScript as a dev dependency. Well, Node has that support, so Node supports TypeScript by default. So you don't need to install TypeScript. But we will install TypeScript when you want to actually configure a tsconfig file, or in order to generate a tsconfig file, we'll install TypeScript, because TypeScript uses a tsc compiler. All right, so in all of this, this is just in development, right? So if you want to do this in production, then you use a start script. You can name it anything, but convention is to use the start. So I'm going to say node this, but you use .env instead of .env.local. Save. Then you put the file name. It is going to be dist / app.ts.js. All right, so if you are okay with this approach, then go ahead and use it. But what I want to do is actually use a more robust approach, tsnode dev. So if I go to tsnode dev and I scroll down to, I scroll down to this one here. So we have to install it. So as a dev dependency, save. So you can either use the -- save -dev flag or just use -d, whichever works for you, as you can see in the auto completion, and press enter. All right, so let me clear this, and you don't need to actually close this. So what I want to do is just to copy this and paste here. And save. And this is also before 4,000 because I want to show you something here. Oh, so we need to actually generate a tsconfig file for transpile our TypeScript code to JavaScript. So we need a compilation for that. We need a compiler, a TypeScript compiler. We need a tsc compiler. So what I want to do is just to, so if you do npx tsc --init, when you did this, you ran this command, it generated a tsconfig.json here. So let's close this and let's search for outDir, changes to dist, then rootDir, changes to src, save. All right, so this works. So let's try and run our TypeScript. So we don't actually need to remove this. We don't need to include -- watch here. Good. So you can see it's 4,000, not 5,000. That's because if you are using this dev dependency, then we need to install a package called .env in order to load our .env.local. But another thing I want to do is, this is entirely optional. I love to actually include only the .ts file, which is actually in our src folder. So you can do with this if you want, or you can just add the .ts here. Then you can just use the default TypeScript exclude, or you define yours. In addition, so I'll just exclude, then node modus, then the dist. We are going to transpile our TypeScript code from the src folder to the dist. So I'm just going to do dist. Then if you are doing testing, then you can do test /* or asterisk, whatever you want to call it, and asterisk.ts, or just leave it like this if you want to. So this is very important. It's good you include this, because if you don't include it, by default, it's going to look like this. And you don't want that. So if you have like TypeScript code outside of the src, it's also going to include that, thereby transpiling unnecessary code and taking time to actually type error. So you actually want to do this. So this is going to just exclude the compilation of these folders or files defined in this array. So now we are through with that. So what I want to do is I want to remove comments when our code is compiled. Good. So now if we try and let's clear this, We try and change this to boolean. Let's see what happens. Clear. So you can see that it's still running our code, just like when we use just node, right? So in order to be able to check our types, errors, in order to support type check-ins at compile time, we need to remove this here because this is going to only transpile. It won't check our type, and save it. Then we start the server again. So as you can see here, it's actually checking our types. So it's not possible to add a number and a boolean together. So this is the approach we are going to adopt throughout this course, or maybe we are going to use Bun. So the reason why normally I use Bun, but the reason why I don't want to use Bun in this series is because Bun is not generally used in all operating systems, but Node is most likely, at least 99% of the time. So we are going to be using npm. But I'm going to show you how to use Bun, but if you see that Bun is working for you, then use Bun. This is my recommendation, but that doesn't really mean anything. You can actually use npm regardless. It doesn't affect your development process. It just helps to install packages fast. It's very fast. And we have others like pnpm, yarns, and the like. So you can just check them out in their documentation and read more. So with this approach now, regardless of the editor I'm using, we are always going to see compile time error like this one here in our terminal. All right, there's a shorthand for this. So you can do ts node dev. Then this one here is just telling us that we want to restart on crash. So anytime our application crashes, we want to actually restart. So if you check the doc, if you read this, what this is actually saying is that it keeps the TS node and the TypeScript compiler warm and active. So anytime you make changes, it makes them warm and active. It doesn't need to respin the compiler for every file change. And this will actually speed up type checking in development. So instead of using TS node, which actually restarts on every file change, but instead it shares the TypeScript compilation process between restarts. That is, it restarts node process using already compiled state and then runs only the files that needs to be changed. And you can think of this like if you worked on React, this is something similar, almost similar, where you have to only update the state that needs to be changed, something like that. Yeah. So it actually helps in faster restarts instead of you trying to reinstall and process your entire TypeScript program on every file change. It actually makes development faster. All right, so there we have it. So I want to now change this to number. Then I'm going to just pause the video and make a comment for this particular file. All right, so if you are interested in using Bun instead, so I'm going to actually show you how to configure that. So I will just delete everything. Delete. And by the way, before I delete that, I want to mention that we actually set our rootDir to this and the outDir to this. So basically, you are not seeing this folder because ts node dev does it in memory. So there's actually a transpilation done, but it's in memory. So that's why you're not seeing it in this working directory. So I'm actually going to just delete all of this. Then let's use Bun. So I'm going to say Bun init. So just like we use npm init. Enter. Then I'm going to select library. Then same here, entry point. Good. So now we have almost similar structure, just that we need to move this in our src folder. All right, so let's see what is in the package.json. So you can optionally just change this to src/app. So I'm going to rename to app, then move it to my src folder. Let's try and run this. Oh, we need to actually, okay. So we are going to be writing code in Node, not in Bun. So we need to actually also install the types/node instead of Bun. So I'm just quickly going to add the script here, save, and now I'll just run Bun dev. So I'm going to GitHub. I'll go to this branch here. And I want to copy the code that I had earlier. Paste. So there you have it. And let's try and change this to boolean and see if it shows an error. So it basically doesn't. So it's just like what we had before when we were using Node. So you can just include this as well. Then open a new terminal and run Bun check. And there you have it. You can either use process or use Bun if you want. It's the same thing.